San Francisco is $3,300 a month. $3,300 for a box with a window and a stove that probably doesn't light on the first try. People pay it. People fight for it. People refresh Craigslist at 2 a.m, hoping to find something, anything under $3,000 that doesn't require a background check, a blood oath, and 6 months up front. So when a 1-bedroom in the Richmond district shows up for $1,800 a month, rent controlled, recently renovated, great natural light, you don't ask questions, you sign. Ethan Byrne signed, and for a little while, it was the best decision he ever made. Then he found what was in the walls. Let's begin. Ethan was 31, UX designer at a mid-stage startup that made project management software. The kind of company that described itself as reimagining workflow and had a ping pong table no one used. He'd moved to San Francisco from Denver 3 months earlier for the job. Good salary, stock options that might be worth something if the Series B closed. The kind of setup that feels like you're building a life, even if most of what you're building is someone else's product. The apartment was in the Richmond district, the avenues, the fog belt, the part of the city that tourists never see because it's 40 blocks from anything anyone puts on a postcard. Pastel row houses stacked shoulder to shoulder, corner markets with faded awnings, streets so quiet on weekday mornings you could hear the N Judah rumbling underground 3 blocks south. The Richmond used to be Irish, deeply, generationally Irish. Back in the 1870s, when the Irish made up 1/3 of the city's population. Neighborhoods like this were where they built their churches, their pubs, their quiet lives. The fog reminded them of home, people said. Or maybe it was just whether rent was cheap enough for families with nothing. By the time Ethan moved in, most of that history was invisible. A Celtic cross on a church, a pub name no one thought about. The Irish had come, built, stayed for 100 years, and been slowly replaced. First by Russian immigrants, then Chinese families, then tech workers like Ethan, who found the neighborhood on Zillow and thought it seemed chill. The apartment itself was old, built in 1921 according to the listing. 1 bedroom, hardwood floors that creaked in specific places, like the building was speaking a language you almost understood. A kitchen that hadn't been updated since the 70s. Avocado green countertops. A gas stove with knobs one smooth. The kind of kitchen that dared you to renovate it. Ethan accepted the dare. He was a designer. He thought in systems, in interfaces, in making things better. He bought a pry bar and a utility knife and started watching YouTube tutorials on plaster removal. The building manager, a guy named Dan, mid-50s, been running the place for 20 years, told him he could do whatever he wanted to the kitchen as long as he didn't touch the load-bearing walls. mess with the plumbing," Dan added. "This building's old. The pipes have opinions." Ethan started with the wall behind the stove. Peeled back layers, wallpaper from the 80s, paint from the 60s, plaster from God knows when. The wall was thick, dense. The deeper he got, the more it smelled like something. Not mold, not rot. Something earthier, organic, like peat smoke and damp wool. And something underneath both of those things that he couldn't name. Behind the last layer of plaster, his pry bar hit metal. A dull, heavy clang that rang through the kitchen and didn't fade the way it should have. A box. Small, maybe 8 inches long, 5 inches wide. Tin, blackened with age, sealed shut with dark wax that had hardened to the texture of stone. It had been plastered into the wall, not hidden behind it, built into it deliberately, like someone had placed it there before the plaster dried and then covered it up. He cracked the wax with a flathead screwdriver. Inside, wrapped in cloth that smelled like a country he'd never been to, peat smoke and sea salt and something older, were 14 gold coins. No note, no explanation. Just 14 coins, each about the size of a quarter, but heavier. Warm, not room temperature. Warm, the way a coin feels after you've been holding it in your palm for an hour. Except, no one had been holding these. They'd been sealed in a wall for decades. Ethan held one up to the kitchen light. A woman's profile on one side, a shield on the other. Old. Very old. He set them on the counter and stood there for a long time, listening to the building settle around him. He went to the building storage unit that afternoon. Dan had mentioned that the previous tenant, a Mrs. Callahan, 80s, lived in the apartment for 47 years before moving to assisted living, had left some boxes behind. Ethan found them in the corner, old cardboard, soft with age. Inside, prayer cards, black and white photographs, a rosary with beads worn smooth, and a hand-drawn map of the apartment. Precise. Every room labeled in careful handwriting. One wall, the kitchen wall, his kitchen wall, was marked with a small cross. Next to it, in faded ink, 2 words: Nabanlesh. Ethan didn't speak Irish. He didn't Google it. He put the box aside and went back to his coins. He took the coins to an appraiser the next day, a coin dealer in the Tenderloin, who operated out of a storefront with bars in the windows and a buzzer on the door. The neighborhood smelled like exhaust and hot grease, and something sour that might have been the city itself sweating. Inside, the shop was cool and dim. Glass cases lined with velvet, the hum of a dehumidifier. The man behind the counter was 60, maybe older, with jeweler's loops hanging from his neck like medals, and fingers stained yellow from decades of handling old metal. Ethan set the coins on the counter. The appraiser looked at them the way a doctor looks at an X-ray, reading something Ethan couldn't see. He examined each coin under magnification, weighed them, tested the metal, didn't speak for several minutes. The shop was quiet except for the clink of gold on the brass scale and the scratch of his notes. "British sovereigns," he said finally. "Victorian era, 1840s, early in her reign, pre-famine if they came from Ireland." He set one down on the felt pad. "Where'd you get these?" Ethan told him about the wall. The appraiser didn't blink. 14 coins. This condition. Call it 4,000 per coin, maybe more at auction. 60,000 conservatively. Then the appraiser did something Ethan didn't expect. He pulled his hand back from the coins, rubbed his fingers together, looked at Ethan. "These are warm," he said. "They were in my jacket pocket." "No, I've handled coins in jacket pockets. This is different." He pushed the tray back toward Ethan. "Sell them, fast. Don't sit on these." Ethan didn't sell them all. He sold 10, kept 4. For luck, he told himself. Deposited the money and felt, for the first time since moving to San Francisco, like the city might actually work out. Within 2 weeks, the world rearranged itself around Ethan Byrne. He got promoted. Not a lateral move, a real promotion. Senior designer, 15% raise. His manager told him she'd been watching his work and saw something special. A coworker who'd been next in line, a guy named Marcus who'd been at the company 2 years longer, congratulated him with a handshake that lingered a beat too long. A dating app match turned into an actual relationship. Her name was Lily. She was an architect. She laughed at his jokes and understood his references and texted back within minutes, always. It felt too good. It felt like something a screenwriter would reject for being unrealistic. His startup closed its Series B, $40 million. His stock options tripled in paper value overnight. His landlord called and offered to fund the rest of the kitchen renovation at the building's expense. "You're a good tenant," Dan said. "We want to keep you." A scratch-off ticket at the corner store won $500. He found a $100 bill in a jacket he hadn't worn since Denver. A parking ticket he'd forgotten about was dismissed due to a clerical error. Everything Ethan touched turned to gold. Metaphorically, then almost literally. He didn't notice that Marcus wouldn't meet his eyes in the hallway anymore. That the barista at his coffee shop had started looking tired, exhausted actually, in a way that seemed to deepen every time Ethan walked in. He started carrying one of the coins in his pocket, rubbed it with his thumb during meetings, on the bus, waiting for coffee. He wasn't superstitious. He was a designer. He believed in systems and patterns, in cause and effect. But the pattern was undeniable. The coin felt like a key that had unlocked something in the mechanics of his life. He told friends he was on a hot streak. He started saying things like, "The universe is providing," without irony. He bought around for strangers at a bar and felt magnanimous, generous, lucky. Ethan wasn't a greedy person. That's what made it work. The gold didn't need someone greedy. It needed someone who would rationalize. Someone who would call a miracle a coincidence and keep spending. He never did Google those 2 words from Mrs. Callahan's map. The luck continued for Ethan. But the people around him started losing things. Marcus, the coworker who'd missed the promotion, was laid off 3 weeks later. Restructuring, management said. Nothing personal. Marcus had a kid on the way. Lily's apartment flooded. A pipe burst on the floor above hers and destroyed everything. Furniture, electronics, half her wardrobe. She moved in with Ethan. He told himself it was convenient. Told himself it was the relationship accelerating naturally. Didn't ask himself why his girlfriend's catastrophe felt like it was working in his favor. His neighbor's car was stolen from the street. The coffee shop on the corner, a place called Sean's that had been there for 30 years, closed. The owner, a man in his 70s with hands like old rope, told Ethan the rent had tripled overnight. "Landlord says the neighborhood's changing," he said. "Says he can get more." He said it without bitterness, just exhaustion. Ethan didn't connect any of it. Why would he? His life was perfect. The misfortunes around him were just life. The city, San Francisco being San Francisco. Then the footprints. He found them at 3 in the morning. He'd gotten up for water. The apartment was hot, unusually hot for the Richmond, where summer never really came. And the hallway floor was cold under his bare feet, colder than it should have been. The kind of cold that feels deliberate. He turned on the light, and there they were, muddy footprints on the hardwood. Small, too small for an adult. Child-sized maybe, but not shaped like a child's foot. The toes were wrong, too long, too spread, pressed deep into the mud like whatever made them was heavier than its size suggested. They led from the front door to the kitchen wall. The wall where he'd found the coins, and they stopped, dead. No footprints leading away, as if whatever had walked in had walked into the wall and kept going. He cleaned them up, told himself it was Dan, told himself it was a leak or condensation or something tracked in from the hallway. The mud was dark, almost black, and it smelled like the cloth the coins had been wrapped in. Peat and salt and something underneath. 3 nights later, footprints were back. Same size, same shape, same impossible trail from the front door. But this time, they led to his bedroom door, and they stopped there, facing in. Every hair on the back of his neck rose at once, not gradually, but all at once, like something in the room had just turned its attention toward him. Ethan Googled Naban Lesh at 4 in the morning.
Don't touch it.
He went back to the storage unit, went through Mrs. Callahan's box with hands that wouldn't stay still. Under the prayer cards and the photographs, he found a letter, written on lined paper and handwriting that trembled, not with age, but with something more urgent than age. Dated 1978, addressed to whoever lives here next. The letter explained everything he didn't want to know. Mrs. Callahan's mother had sealed the coins in the wall in 1952. They'd been in the family since the 1840s, brought from Ireland during the famine by her great-grandmother, a woman named Bridget. Bridget had walked out of County Kerry with nothing but the clothes she wore, and a pouch of gold coins she would never explain. The family knew only that she had taken them from a fairy fort, a rath, one of the old ring forts that dot the Irish countryside like scars, places the locals wouldn't touch, places where the boundary between this world and something older was considered thin. In Irish folklore, fairy forts are not ruins. They're thresholds. What lives inside them, the Ishi, the good people, the gentry, whatever name you use to keep from saying the real one. They don't give gifts. They make deals. And the deals are always, always enforced. Bridget prospered, briefly. Her husband died on the crossing. Her son died at 11, a fever that came from nowhere and left as fast. By the time she reached San Francisco, she understood. The gold was not hers. It had never been hers. She'd opened an account she couldn't close, and the interest was paid in people. Her daughter sealed the coins in the wall. The gold stays in walls, the letter said. That's the arrangement. You take it out, and the account opens. And what comes next? It settles. Every generation that had touched the coins had the same experience. Brief prosperity, then loss. Not to them, but around them. The gold extracted its value from proximity, from the people unlucky enough to be near the one who held it. Mrs. Callahan's brother took one coin in 1971. Just one. Bought a car. 6 months later, heart attack. He was 34. Ethan tried to put the coins back. He replastered the wall, pressed them into the wet plaster the way Bridget's daughter must have 100 years ago. Smoothed it over, went to bed. coins were on his nightstand in the morning. All 14, arranged in a neat row. The plaster on the wall was undisturbed. He put them in a safe deposit box at a bank downtown. They were in his coat pocket when he got home. He tried to give them away, handed one to a coworker as a cool antique. The coworker brought it back the next day, ashen-faced. "I don't want this," she said. "It feels wrong. I can't explain it. I don't want it in my house." He threw one off the pier into the bay, watched it arc through the fog and disappear into the gray water. It was on his kitchen counter the next morning, wet, beaded with salt water, smelling like brine and peat, and something that lived in deep water and deep earth at the same time. The footprints were nightly now, and they were getting closer to his bed. He could hear something too. Not footsteps. The prints just appeared, as if whatever made them didn't walk so much as arrive. But at night, in the walls, he could hear a sound. Faint, rhythmic, like breathing, or like counting. Ethan visited Mrs. Callahan at her assisted living facility in Daly City. She was in a wheelchair by a window that looked out on a parking lot. 80-something, thin in the way that old women become thin. Not frail, but distilled. Everything non-essential burned away. She looked at him. Her eyes were clear, not confused, not distant, not the clouded look he'd expected from someone her age. Sharp, focused, like she'd been waiting for this visit for years and was annoyed it had taken so long. "You took them out." Not a question, a diagnosis. She told him the rest, the part the letter hadn't included, the part her mother had only told her once, in the dark, in a voice that didn't sound like her mother's voice. "It's not punishment," Mrs. Callahan said. "That's what people get wrong. It's not a curse. It's a transaction. You got what you wanted. Now someone else pays. Not you, never you. The people near you. Your friends, your family, the woman in your apartment, the man at the coffee shop." "How do I stop it?" Ethan asked. She looked at him the way a doctor looks at a patient who's asked the question too late. "You don't stop it, you give it back. Everything. The gold goes back in the wall and..." She trailed off. "That's the only door that closes. And if I just leave, move out. The last person who tried that was my grandmother. She made it all the way to California." Mrs. Callahan's hands tightened on the armrests of her chair. The account followed her across an ocean. What makes you think it won't follow you across a city? Ethan went home. The apartment smelled like peat smoke. Not faintly, thick, choking, the way a room smells when a fire has been burning in it for hours. But there was no fire. The smoke was cold. It coated the back of his throat and didn't dissipate when he breathed. The air was colder than the Richmond fog, colder than the building's old radiators could explain. The wall where he'd found the coins was wet. Not with water. Something dark and loamy seeped through the plaster. Soil, or something that remembered being soil a long time ago. It smelled like a field after rain, like the earth of a country he'd never visited, but somehow recognized. The footprints were everywhere now. Every room, the kitchen, the hallway, the bathroom floor. Dozens of them overlapping, circling, like something had been pacing the apartment for hours. They were still wet. Ethan sat at the kitchen table, all 14 coins in front of him. He didn't turn on the lights. He didn't sleep. At 3:17 a.m., he heard it. A laugh. Low, delighted, coming from inside the wall. Not muffled by plaster or brick. Clear, close, intimate. Like someone standing just on the other side of something very thin. He could feel the vibration of it in his chest. A laugh that sounded like it had been waiting for a very long time, and was pleased, genuinely pleased, that the waiting was over. Ethan moved out the next morning, packed one bag, left everything else, the furniture, the kitchen tools, the half-finished renovation, left the coins on the kitchen counter because he couldn't bring himself to touch the wall again. He locked the door behind him and slid the key under Dan's office door at 6 a.m. before anyone else was awake. He was out of the city within a week. Didn't leave a forwarding address. He lost his job within a month. Restructuring. His stock options expired worthless when the startup folded. The Series B investors pulled out overnight, citing concerns about leadership. Lily left. Not dramatically. She just stopped calling, stopped texting, drifted away like she'd never been there at all. His savings drained. Medical bills from a fall that broke his wrist. A tax audit. A parking ticket that somehow became a warrant. Everything the gold had given him, it took back with interest. He was back to zero, exactly where he'd been before he opened the wall. Worse than zero, because now he knew what zero cost. The apartment was relisted 2 months later. 1 bedroom, Richmond district, recently renovated kitchen, great natural light, rent controlled, $1,800 a month. In San Francisco, where the median rent is $3,300, a 1 bedroom for $1,800 isn't a deal. It's a miracle. The kind of thing that makes you refresh the listing 3 times to make sure it's real. The kind of thing that makes you sign before someone else does. The listing is still up if you're curious. I checked. Richmond District, 1 bedroom, recently renovated kitchen, hardwood floors, fog views, $1,800 a month, no broker fee. The photos look great. Big windows, clean countertops, fresh paint on every wall, especially the kitchen wall. Someone did a beautiful job on that plaster. I wonder who moves in next. Until next time, this is Hollowgrin, already counting. Just not on luck.